we're going to test whether or not I can figure out the Rumble presentation capability. I'm very familiar with it on StreamYard, but in all honesty, I had a tutorial from my daughter. So I'm treading in new territory now. So everybody's just going to have to bear with me. All right. Let's see if I can take this and paste it into X to let everybody know that we're live, and then we're going to get started. All right, we are live. There you go. So hopefully that worked out. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. I am going to share my screen. And hopefully, yeah, there we go. Okay. So I am going to go through this document here. This document, and I do like to show everybody this. So if you look up here, this is the agency that basically produced the document. And it's the originator. It wasn't necessarily written to or from anyone. The date of it is 1976. Now, what's important about 1976 is this is in the middle of all of the investigations into the CIA. And you can see it's a miscellaneous record from the Church Committee. So this is basically talking about the Senate Committee for Intelligence, is what that means. So keep in mind that this is the irony of this. The United States government, i.e. Congress, spent a fortune in an investigation committee of reviewing the CIA. They produce a product and then turn around and classify it. They spent your money. The CIA spent your money doing all of this shit that we're going to go over. And then the Congress spent your money to investigate the shit that they gave the money to the CIA to do. And then they hide all of it from you, but then tell you that you're supposed to be the informed voter deciding on what's going on in your government when they hide everything going on in your government. So just want to make sure you got all of that. And that's just on the title page. All right. So let's look over this. My computer's being a little glitchy here. All right. So introduction and philosophy of use. Talking about the operating proprietaries, and that means front companies, and then non-operating proprietaries. What is the statutory authority for even having them? Specific controls, agency regulations, policies, project reviews, controls. There is no control, by the way. Financial controls, operating companies and non-operating companies, keeping books of accounts. And I'm going to explain to you why there's no accountability to this at all. This is all window dressing. Treatment of profits. What do they do with the money that they make? Because some of the companies are actual, like the cargo companies, like the ones we were just talking about, Southern Air Transport, actually flew real missions in addition to the CIA missions. And some of the real missions were covers for the CIA missions. So they actually charged people. A lot of times your tax dollars was paid to Southern Air Transport because it was set up to not look like the government. So they used government money to use it. They contract to the Department of Defense, again, using your money. So you are funding the CIA operations. Disposition of funds returned from proprietaries, disposal of proprietaries, relationship with tax, regulatory, and other agencies. Wait till we get to that part. Okay. Proprietary list, employees of proprietaries, funding and payroll, description of major headquarters controlled proprietaries, listing of proprietaries through this certain period, um, disposal of the agency proprietaries, the sale of Southern Air Transport, a case in disposal of a CIA proprietary, um, and then a particular actual operation. Beyond doing business, peak non-government security investments by proprietary, insurance and investments. Yep, they did that too. Issues posed, conclusions, and recommendations. All right. We won't get through this in one night, but I am, before we get started, doing my best rendition of CanCon and poured myself a glass of wine. I might need it at the end of this, trying to figure out all of this now. Anyway, okay. Questions have arisen as to the CIA's use of proprietaries, again, fake companies, to carry out the CIA's mission. In particular, concerns have been expressed about the agency's financial and management control. Like, how do you do this? Who keeps the books? Do you pay taxes? What's the whole deal with all of this? And then it goes on to explain there's two kinds: operating companies that actually do business as would any private firm, and non operating companies that are basically just fronts. These entities may be legally constituted as corporations, partnerships, or sole proprietariships, or they may have no legal standing at all, completely fake. They may be notional entities which have bank accounts and backstopped addresses controlled by the agency. And what that means is, like, remember when we were reading about the Alabama guard working for as a contractor to the CIA as the pilots in the Cuban bullshit Bay of Pigs? They had Dropbox companies. They had a company actually in Miami that went out and was like a headhunter and found these guys, contracted with them. But like when they were wanted to send mail back and forth, they had like these dead entities that were like basically like a company that was really just a mailbox, kind of like Eric voting registration that just literally had a mailbox. Was that a CIA front too? What? Wait a minute. Huh. The CIA being involved in elections. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. Okay. So you get the idea of what they're saying here. Down here it says the purpose served by them are twofold. They provide cover, attribution for funding, and administrative assistance to agents and covert operations. And they provide services not securely available through normal commercial facilities. So, in other words, they're enablers for their covert operations. Because they are established as private organizations, they must be established and managed to the extent possible in accordance with local requirements, meaning they have to look as legit as they can without being legit at all. Of the legally constituted entities, the agency uses the corporate form in most cases because of the advantages and flexibility of corporate management control. These corporations are legally organized under the law of a state, country, or other jurisdiction and are either wholly owned by the CIA or controlled through majority stock ownership, kind of like Crypto AG. These services of bona fide businessmen are enlisted as nominee officers, directors, and stockholders. Yeah, kind of like when, like on Air America, the actual people that owned it were basically just figureheads listed as directors and officers when in fact the entire time it was ran by the CIA. The agency generally has employed proprietaries when it was the only way, or clearly the best way, to achieve an objective. Under agency rules, proprietaries are established or allowed to continue in existence only for so long as they contribute to the accomplishment of this agency's mission and remain the most advantageous operational means of achieving the objectives. Current policy calls for limited use of operating proprietaries. Limited use, except for they use them all the time. I don't call that limited, but the capability to use the mechanism is to be related, the agency's term, to capability in being. The smaller entities used, whatever, is to be retained, and the smaller entities used. A review of agency files show that the number of operating proprietaries has been consciously pared by about 50% since the mid 60s, meaning that there was a shit ton of them in the mid 60s. I wonder why that would have been throughout the 50s when they were setting up Gladio, and then throughout the early part of the 60s when they're assassinating a president. You probably need a shit ton of proprietaries, because you got to dirty up Oswald in Mexico and Russia and all of these other places, New Orleans. You're going to need a lot of proprietaries. These reductions began as a result of the Katzenbach guidelines associated with the National Student Association affair in 1968 and the CIA's own IG survey that same year. Now, what would that be? Let's look up, because I want you guys just to see. Hold on, Katzenbach affair. The student, we actually went over this, but Nicholas Katzenbach was involved in the revelation that the what's the best way of saying that? That the National Student Association basically was behind a whole bunch of the CIA's rabble rousing in the United States, like the Gloria and Steinem and all of those. So, interestingly, it says that Katzenbach has been credited with providing advice after the assassination of JFK that led to the creation of the Warren Commission. He sent a memo to LBJ's White House aide, Bill Moyers. Yeah, same guy. They're in and out of government. Yeah, not really reporters. To investigate the assassination, to combat this speculation that it was a conspiracy. Basically, he played a major role in getting it set up so that they could hide all of the information and then basically say that it was fine. More importantly, from our perspective, he went to work at IBM, which, as you know, had a lot to do with Operation Gladio as one of the oligarch companies. He also became a law partner at a company in New Jersey. He was named chairman of BCCI in 1991, just before it failed. Yeah, this is the same guy. He is knee deep into Operation Gladio, 100%. And you can look him up. He's in a whole bunch of other stuff. But so it got blown up that the CIA was funding the student rabble rousing, and basically, which turned into the Weather Underground, which we know was Gladio, and the bombings, because they looked just like everything that was happening in Europe. So it's crazy how such a little circle of these people exist. And you wouldn't know any of this if you just read this and didn't know about Operation Gladio. Okay. In addition, the need for proprietaries has declined as a result of a general shift in the emphasis away from covert action. I'm sorry. I'm choking on my wine. Transfer of Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty to the Board of International Broadcasting with funding through the State Department, i.e., it's still part of the CIA. We're just pretending that it's not. Continuing liquidation of the assets of Air America, while at the same time we're creating these other ones. This is just a smoke and mirrors thing. The sale of Southern Air Transport and the continuing liquidation of assets of the Intermountain Aviation, with their exposure in the press and the decreased need for contingency air capabilities. So again, let's just take a second and look up Intermountain Aviation, since we're going to do this live dig. Intermountain Aviation. And what does that say? Oh, Intermountain Airlines was known as a CIA airline front company, performed covert operations for the CIA in Southeast Asia and elsewhere during the Vietnam War. Intermountain's main base of operation was in Tucson, Arizona. Oh, shit. That company was bought by Evergreen, which is the company that I worked for. As soon as I just saw Tucson, I'm like, oh, son of a bitch, that's Evergreen, isn't it? It is Evergreen, a company that was acknowledged connections to the CIA and the CIA proprietary airlines such as Air America and Air Asia. During its years of operation, Intermountain used several types of aircraft. Oh my God, they used Curtiss C-46 Commandos. Who owned the Curtiss franchise in Southeast Asia? Oh, that's William Pauly. Oh my gosh. Are you shitting me? Okay, they also flew Lockheed L-188s, de Havilland Canada DHC-4 Caribous, and DHC-6 Twin Otters. One of their covert missions was Project Cold Feet, which was a 1962 CIA operation to extract intelligence from an abandoned Soviet Arctic drifting ice station due to the nature of its abandonment as a result of unstable ice, in which its intelligence operatives were dropped into the Arctic to basically check out the station, and then recovered using a Fulton Skyhook recovery system mounted in an Intermountain B-17 Flying Fortress. The modified B-17 civilian registration, blah, 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 had previously operated out of Clark Air Base in the Philippines in an all-black scheme of CIA's insertion and other unspecified covert operations. Its Skyhook appeared in the end of the James Bond film Thunderball. It is alleged to have been involved in the delivery of a number of A-26 Invader bombers to be flown by the Cuban exiles in the Bay of Pigs. There you go. Very, very small circle. They're all right here. Oh, and by the way, that hook was the same thing that was going to be used and failed to get those. I have the book right here somewhere. To get the 2 pilots that were stranded in China and left there for 20 years because that hook did not work. Okay, so there you have it. Moving on. It's just blowing my mind. The evidence establishes that activities of all proprietaries, direct or indirectly, support the agency's foreign intelligence collections or covert action missions. Some of these proprietaries are located within the United States for reasons of operational and administrative necessity, but their ultimate impact is overseas. Not always. Some, especially the National Student operation, it was 100% in the United States. Some of the questionable domestic uses of these entities is dealt with in the sections of reports on chaos and related programs. Because actually flying drugs into the United States is considered in the United States. And in one area, a program called MH Mutual, a series of questions remain to the proprietary of using. I think Siri thought I said her name. Either that or somebody just took control of my computer. Serious questions remain as to the proprietary of using such a mechanism to provide insurance and retirement benefits. This problem is detailed later. And that this is actually very interesting. They had front companies that ran insurance and retirement benefits for their assets, not their agents. So obviously the agents are on government payroll, but they were the entire time they're trying to tell you that someone was a contract employee and just went rogue. They're actually providing insurance and retirement benefits for the asset as opposed to the agent. This is disclosed in here. So these people were not assets. They were actually employees of the CIA with benefits, retirement benefits, insurance, life insurance. They have front companies that manage their life insurance investments and the retirement investments. You're going to see all of that in here. And I want you to think through the whole time we're doing this, the Senate knows all of this. This is in a document that they classified in the Senate as a result of the Church Commission. They knew all of this and didn't change a fucking thing. That's why no committee in Congress should ever be set up again. If there's going to be a criminal investigation, there should be a criminal investigation. The Congress is nothing but bought off puppets that put on a performance called a committee and classify all of the shit. It's incredible. Okay, moving on. As discussed in greater detail later, operating proprietaries conduct business in the commercial sphere, but they are not in direct competition with privately owned corporations, which is a bullshit lie. There is no doubt, however, that they were in competition. The agency has been careful to limit the amount of commercial business engaged in by these proprietaries to only that necessary to support the viability of a commercial cover. In other words, if you go down to Miami and you wanted cargo, legitimate cargo shipped to Latin America, if they weren't on a CIA mission, these guys would be able to undercut every other legitimate cargo aircraft carrier down there because they're being supplemented by the CIA. And they have to do a certain amount of other cargo shipments in order to appear legit, right? So on their resume that goes on a website that's fake too, it's going to say we did cargo for this company, and this company. Well, if no one can afford to fly on them or they don't actually have other customers, then somebody looking on their website is going to go, oh, that's a CIA cover company. So in order to get the traffic when they're available to do the traffic, they undercut the other carriers 100%. That's how they ended up with the UPS contract as Evergreen. Evergreen wanted access to, or the CIA, I should say, wanted access to all of the routes that UPS flew. It's the perfect cover. And because it's worldwide, by the way. And so having those contracts, they're able to undercut everybody else other cargo airlines like DHS or whatever that was bidding on those contracts because they are supplemented by the CIA. So this whole thing's bullshit. And there's a bunch of lawyers and businessmen sitting in Congress. They know they're lying to them. All right. Revenues have been used to partially offset operating costs. Aggregate profits over the years have been relatively small because they're not in it to make money. Only two proprietaries have ever shown significant profits. The Air America complex in fulfilling mostly government contracts in Southeast Asia, and the insurance company handling trust funds in insurance, which was MH Mutual. So that's very interesting. The one that made the most money is the one doing the most drug trafficking. The Air Proprietary Overview details the dilemmas posed by the size. Moreover, it sheds light on questions concerning whether commercial viability became more of a bronze god than was necessary to maintain adequate cover. Yeah, and that's a definite yes. Operating proprietaries may be large or small in terms of capitalization and total assets, depending upon functions they perform. When the commercial purpose of an operating proprietary is coincidental with its CIA mission, such as what? Export import firm, which engages in commercial operations only to the extent necessary to provide cover for a CIA officer in a foreign country. Wait just a minute. Export import firms. Isn't that what we've discovered in almost every single story that we've told? Like where they were operating in New Orleans? Wasn't that an export import firm? Yes, it was. Oh, you mean like the one they set up for Otto Skorzeny? Yes, just like that one. Wasn't Permadex one of the? Yes, it was. Are you kidding me? They're telling you exactly what they're doing. Okay. All right. Anyway, capitalization, blah, 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 $25,000. And oh, by the way, this import export firm, that's exactly what Edwin Wilson set up in Libya for them to do arms, just so that you remember that. Oranges. Yeah, the fruit. Yeah, all of it. All of this is basically illustrating, Bridget sending me notes, the whole putting heroin in fruit was done with import export firms. So this is just crazy. All right. Examples of operating proprietary in which commercial operations are incidental to the agencies. And here, they're going to give us some. Okay, so let's just read this. A United States frozen seafood importing company, which operates in the Far East and provides cover for an agency employee engaged in intelligence activities in the Far East. We had a seafood importing one that was being used in Latin America, shipping seafood into Miami, too. It may be a favorite one. The agency provided $25,000 in capital to purchase and activate a dormant but long established privately owned U.S. seafood distributing company. The former owner and his partner, who are cleared and witting, provide training, business management, and product distribution in the United States for one half of the profits on seafood imports financed by the proprietary. The agency subsequently provided $10,000 annually for fiscal years 72, 73, and 74 as working capital. The proprietary, since 71, has provided excellent cover with a minimum amount of business. As of 20 June 1974, the proprietary had assets of $104,000 and a net worth of about 75,000. The company's financial accounts are handled by an agency proprietary management firm. Now, what let me finish this. A foreign travel service company which operates in Southeast Asia country and provides cover for an agent targeted against the local Communist Party. The company was established in 73 with an investment of like $6,000. All right. So, what's interesting about the seafood one is, again, if you were in the seafood importing business, this company, that's the front company, is going to be importing seafood, right? Because that's how they maintain their front. Well, if they're in Miami, and I'm going to bet they are, because that's where Paul Helliwell was the Taiwan consul from Taiwan, where he used to be the ambassador and where he set up Chiang Kai shek and all that other crap. Okay, so if you're in Miami and you're in the seafood business, this company is having part of its overhead underwritten by the CIA every year to the tune of $10,000 here. So they don't have to charge the same prices for their seafood as you do because they're being supplemented by your government. Operating proprietaries whose commercial purposes are in themselves essential to the CIA mission require a much larger capitalization and investment. They are staffed by agency personnel plus cleared commercial employees as required. Among the agency's operating proprietaries of this type are 4 management companies which provide commercial assistance to other proprietaries and an audit firm which conducts commercial audits of operating companies and whose non-operating proprietaries with substantial assets. So basically, what it's saying is that they have their own independent auditor that goes around and tells you everything is fine. And they also have both CIA paid by you and I people, as well as their assets that have their off the books employees that have these other CIA proprietary front companies managing their benefit packages for them. Okay, so the largest proprietaries are Air America, an insurance complex, and the aviation facility Intermountain Aviation, the one we just talked about in Tucson that becomes Evergreen. The assets of Intermountain have been sold with operations. They were sold to Evergreen. And it says that operations ceased in February of 75, but Evergreen was a CIA front company too. You see how they lie? Yeah, it didn't go away. Air America, the agency's largest proprietary, which is in the process of liquidation, provided aircraft in support of agency operations in Southeast Asia. This support had been under cover of a commercial flying service in fulfillment of U.S. government contracts. You paid for it. Corporate headquarters was in Washington, D.C., with field headquarters where? Oh, yeah, Taiwan. Yeah, imagine that. The drug airline with headquarters in D.C. and Chiang Kai shek's Taiwan. I'm shocked. The insurance complex provides a mechanism for the payment of annuities and other benefits to sensitive agents and for self-insurance of risk involved in covert operations for security reasons. Cannot be attributed to the U.S. government or handled through private firms. The complex was formed in 1962 as a clandestine commercial support mechanism to provide death and disability benefits to agents or their beneficiaries when security considerations precluded the payment of them being made by the US government. So these are covert agents that are off the books, that the money through these illicit activities are going into pay for their death and disability benefits, when it can't be an official government paycheck going to them. This function was broadened to include self-insurance for many risks involved in covert operations, including property risk incurred by operational activities of agency-owned air and marine companies. From an early date, the complex has administered agents' escrow accounts and life insurance and provided annuity and pension programs for selected agent personnel employed by the agency. These programs are solely for the purpose of meeting their obligations to agent type personnel, meaning assets, who have rendered services over a substantial period of time and cannot be handled under the normal government retirement programs. Individuals who qualify for a CIA retirement system or civil service are not handled through the system. They're just for the assets. In addition, the complex has been used to provide a limited amount of support for covert operations. So they are hiding covert operations under their insurance program, just so they get you. Oh, and they buy real estate, which is the reason why, as a conduit of funding for these things. So that goes back to the conversation that Stellar and I have all the time of real estate being the only cash transaction that doesn't require you to find out where the cash is coming from. And that's the reason right there. The CIA likes parking their illicit funds in real estate. So that's not ever going to change. Go ahead and recommend in Congress that that changes tomorrow and see who comes out of the woodwork. Intermountain Aviation, Inc. Has the purpose of providing a variety of non-attributable air support capabilities available for quick deployment overseas to support agency activities. You know, like when you want to go kill Lumumba or you want to go kill Allende. Yeah, these are the services. The agency is in the process of disposing of these assets or terminating the activity. And that's a bold-faced lie, because if you track the disposition of one airline, another one pops up. And just like when Air America supposedly was sold, go ahead and do the tracking of who bought it and when and what their backgrounds are. They still have all of this. They just fold them when too much attention comes to them, and then they rebirth another one over here. Nothing ever goes away. As of 1 July 1974, there were 71 operating proprietary companies, of which 21 are part of the agency's proprietary insurance complex. The combined net worth of these companies, $57 million. And that's just what they're willing to tell you. This is not the black funds. Although some, such as those in the insurance complex, are commercially self-supporting, most operating require budgetary support because they're fake. Non-operating proprietaries. This is a completely different section of proprietaries. Those were the operators we just talked about. Non-operating proprietaries vary in complexity according to their agency task, are, for the most part, either corporate shells or less that facilitate foreign operations and clearly pose no competitive threat to businesses. The most elaborate are legally licensed and established to conduct business. They have stockholders, directors, and officers, and are generally directed by one of the four agency proprietary management companies. The company address may just be a post office box, a legitimate address provided by a cleared or witting company official or attorney, or in a few cases, a proprietary management company. A cleared and witting company official or attorney. They maintain bank accounts, generate business correspondence, keep books of account, which can withstand commercial and tax audits, file federal and state income tax, and perform normal business reporting to regulatory authorities in order to check out if someone was to ever come look to see if they're a CIA proprietary. So it's saying that they cover all the bases here. As of 31 December 73, 38 of these companies had a combined net worth of 325,000. Of this amount, 200,000 was operating capital for the three companies which provide cover for all of the rest. Examples of two non-operating companies which are commercially managed, keep books of account, and can withstand commercial and tax audits are the following. One, a Florida corporation capitalized at $7,000 and whose legal address is the office of a cleared and witting attorney. Cleared and witting attorney. Under the auspices of the Florida Corporation, an agency officer established a branch office in a Central American country and conducts a sporting goods business, which provides him cover. Now, what do you do with sporting goods in Latin America? Guns, munitions. Yeah, that's what you do. Administration of the corporation, including purchase of inventory for the branch office, is handled by a proprietary management company. Isn't that convenient? All right, let's get back up here. A Liechtenstein Anstalt, which an agency nominee established, and that's like a company. Liechtenstein is the place, and then Anstalt is like the company, using a reliable but non-witting lawyer as a resident agent. In other words, they lied to the lawyer and told him that this is a legitimate company when in fact it's not. This company was used to purchase a property in a European country from which an audio operation was mounted against an installation in a communist country. Upon conclusion of the operation, the property will be sold and the proceeds returned to the CIA. Again, cash, real estate, requiring less elaborate commercial administration because of the nature of the agency tasks performed are 31 legally incorporated companies which are directly managed by agency headquarters specialists operating in alias as signatories to the company bank accounts. Yeah. So they just make up fake names, register companies, and then maintain books with these fake people. Each of these companies generally have a capitalization of 5,000 or less and are domiciled in the offices of cleared and witting attorneys. So this is very interesting because you guys remember that a lot of the people in these stories that we've uncovered they end up sitting in legal offices throughout the Washington D.C. area. Kind of, and remember they were sitting in some of the PR firms like Hill and Knowlton. So they're actually basically telling us that this is one of their ways of doing this business. No commercial books of accounts are kept, and in the event of a tax audit, the agency has to brief the auditing authority. Depending on use, administration may be as simple as maintaining bank accounts and filing annual franchise taxes, or more extensive as required when obtaining an employee identification number, paying personnel, withholding taxes and Social Security, and filing tax returns. Examples of these are a Nevada proprietary corporation domiciled at the offices of a California law firm. Three members of the firm serve as agency nominee stockholders, directors, and officers for the proprietary, which holds title to two aircraft used by the agency for flight training and testing avionics equipment. In this case, only administration is required to maintain a bank account, file a franchise tax, and coordinate with the law firm. And that's another reason why the IRS does not want Elon Musk in their records because the IRS has a particular area where the CIA tells them these companies are. If for any reason they're super secret and they actually come up like in the random audit, the CIA just picks up the phone and tells the IRS to nix the audit, and they do. Um, this will all be exposed if they get into the IRS. Although not proprietary corporations, but proprietaries in the sense of being an agency owned or administered are 64 sole proprietariships. The agency establishes and registers these in the name of fictitious persons and opens a bank account on which agency officers in alias have signatory powers. So again, they are going around opening fake bank accounts with fake aliases. Arrangements are made with cleared and witting businessmen to provide a domicile address for these entities at a law firm or a telephone answering service. These entities, like the proprietary corporation administered by agency headquarters specialists, provide cover, payroll, and tax attributions for agency personnel and are similarly administered. Another type of entry used by the agency and a proprietary only in the sense of being agency owned and administered is exemplified by some 215 companies which are now legally registered but have names and bank accounts controlled by the agency. This is a shit ton of companies. I'm not going to lie. This is a shit ton of companies. The agency arranges with cleared and witting attorneys or proprietors of telephone answering services to provide a address and to refer any queries to the agency specialists concerned. These notional entities are used to provide status and operational cover for agency personnel involved in all types of high risk intelligence operations. High risk being assassinations. They are also used as ostensible clients for purposes of funding agency proprietaries or bona fide American companies that provide cover and payrolling for the agency. Looks like Air America purchased Southern Air. Yes, yes. That's what I'm saying. If you follow the threads, Bridget's just telling me that someone had commented about Renee about Air America purchased Southern Air. It's just a big bullshit thing. These don't ever go away. If they get found out, if they get any way associated with the CIA, oh my God, we got to sell it. And then they act like they sell it. They didn't sell it. They just get another agency person to set up the exact same thing under a different name. The agency's statutory authority to spend money for proprietary corporations in support of agency operations comes from the act, the act that established the CIA. Well, no, that was before that, but this is a CIA Act of 1949, and here's a quote from it. The sums made available to the agency may be expended without regard to the provisions of law or regulation relating to the expenditure of government funds. In other words, here's your money, do whatever the hell you want. None of the rules apply. And for the objects of a confidential, extraordinary, or emergency nature, such as expenditures to be accounted for solely on the certificate of the director, and every such certificate shall be deemed a sufficient voucher for the amount therein certified. In other words, get the director's signature for $1 million to go kill Lumumba. No problem. We don't even want to know. Congress did that. The language contained in Section 8B is adequate authority to exclude the operation of these proprietary corporations from law governing government corporations. However, the CIA General Counsel ruled in 1958 that the CIA should comply with the principles in that act to the extent possible, and this has been done. Sure, to the extent possible. They just tell you it's not possible. because of national security. Attached as Appendix A is a classified memorandum of law by the agency's general counsel on CIA's authority to acquire and dispose of proprietaries without regard to provisions of Federal Property and Administrative Services Act. This is very important because technically, if it's government owned, it has to be auctioned to the highest bidder. And this is like the lawsuit here where it says Farmer and Southern Air Transport. Yeah, Southern Air Transport didn't do that, and they got sued. And basically, they threw the case out saying, "Yeah, that doesn't apply to us. We don't have to do any of that shit." No law that Congress writes applies to the CIA. And it was the Congress that exempted them. So this isn't a CIA problem at the end of the day. It's a congressional problem, as it always is. The formation and activities of proprietaries are controlled through various mechanisms to assure their proper use. Headquarters Regulation 230-8 and 230-1 prescribe administrative rules. Now, this again is how they're supposed to dispose of the funds and any other equipment in these fake companies pretending to actually do work. It says that it must be coordinated among components concerned and approved. This regulatory control, along with policy memoranda, are intended to ensure proper conduct by entities, which never happens. Each agency component involved is responsible for compliance, and the chief of the cover and commercial staff, the director of finance, and the comptroller are supposed to be watchful. The controls and procedures applicable to the proprietaries are specified in an administrative plan at the deputy director level. Basically, do whatever the hell you want. Semi-annual reviews are conducted to determine whether or not the operational needs still exist. Regular audits are performed to ensure proper management and financial accountability. This is just, it's ludicrous on its surface. Proper accountability and financial stewardship of shit that they're using to assassinate presidents. It's almost laughable. Under agency regulations, these proprietaries are established and managed to appear to be consistent. In other words, we're going to fake the audits so they look like real audits. Specific requirements for the general management and financial controls of each such proprietary are provided in the administrative plan described above, which specifies the basic framework for how it's supposed to operate. All facets of an administrative plan referring to the funding of proprietaries and its financial management are subject to the concurrence of blah, blah, blah. Primary purpose of this is to ensure that the financial controls and procedures prescribed by the proprietaries are compatible and consistent with normal practices. This is mind-blowing to me. These people are using fake companies to go out and assassinate people and set up terrorist operations, and they spend 500 words to tell you that we're keeping our books right. Okay. Now we're talking about the stock paid in capital, blah, blah, blah. Because as far as I'm concerned, this stuff's all bullshit. All control documents evidencing agency equity and interest in the proprietaries, executed stock certificates, blah, 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 are held in safekeeping by the Commercial Systems and Audit Division in order to be able to get their money at the end of the day when they get found out and they have to dissolve that one, only to set up the next one. Okay. Financial controls of non-operating companies, except those keeping books, which is hysterical. Non-operating with books. Entities in this category are financed if financing is required through the establishment of a bank account on which the agency officers in their alias form are signatories. All such accounts are maintained in the accounting records of the agencies. All passages of funds to these accounts add to the accountable balance of the accounts. No income is produced by these activities. All disbursements of these accounts are charged as current expenditures and liquidation of obligations. Signatories are agency officials who, in each case, execute a declaration of trust acknowledging ownership of the account. Payments are initiated only in response to requests by authorized people. The chief of the agency's audit staff is responsible for the audit. Balances of these are monitored periodically to assure they don't. And so, what's interesting about all of this is the entire time they're trying to tell you that they do all of this stuff and they've got everything nailed down, everything's uptight, good to go. You have people like Edwin Wilson over in Libya, um, in a proprietary company that looks like it actually does business. So it would fit in the operational category of this. And he's buying and selling all kinds of crap. He's sending people doing mapping of harbor for Navy intelligence and all kinds of crap out of this fake company in Libya, which is also dealings in arms. And they have this report that the Senate has done, basically documenting how they've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's when they're literally trafficking drugs and guns. Okay. Then it talks about the treatment of profits, and basically it just says policy of retaining profits has continued, although already noted. Very few of them have profits, but when they do, supposedly they all go back to the government. That's what it's saying. Although knowing that people's names are on here as officers and stuff like that, the government is nowhere in here for a reason. So there's no way to actually double check that. There's no way to know that that money went back to anywhere other than to the people that are actually on those documents. As a matter of fact, most of the people that are in these proprietary companies actually end up with the money, with whatever the portions are. And we saw that in Joe Trento's book. It is their compensation, in addition to their CIA paycheck, for taking the risk and doing what they're doing. Edwin Wilson was a CIA agent in the form that they're talking here, and he was a millionaire. He kept whatever portion of the money that his company, which was a CIA front company, made in the weapons trafficking, and he trafficked weapons for the CIA. Okay. Says the Government Corporations Control Act certainly did not contemplate government corporations in the sense that the agency must have them. Neither is it feasible for agency proprietaries to be created by act of Congress or overseen precisely as provided in a normal government corporation. And anybody that doesn't think that government corporation in the same sentence is not an oxymoron is crazy. Nonetheless, the agency has felt that the appropriate and reasonable policy is to treat and control them insofar as possible in accordance to the law, while they're not complying with the law by assassinating heads of state. With rare exception, principally the large air and insurance proprietaries, operating proprietaries have not been self-sustaining or have bona fide incomes. Some incomes, including profits, if received, is retained by the proprietaries consistent with a business enterprise. Yeah, we don't get the money back. The use of proprietaries' profits, however, is controlled by an annual review. The profits situations of the corporations in the context of operational objectives and the cover needs of the corporations. In other words, we're going to do whatever the hell we want with it. Here, it talks about if they ever got any back, like from the sell-off of the aircraft or whatever, all they're going to do, and keep this in mind, they turn around and use it to buy the same shit in the next fake company. And I think that's probably a good place. We've been doing this an hour. I Let's just go through the disposal since we've already talked about Air America, and then we're going to close. But um, I'm going to come back because I want to go through. There's several of these pieces to this puzzle embedded in this document. Air America is the agency's largest proprietary back in the mid 70s when this was done. At its peak, it had a total assets of $50 million and had more than 8,000 employees. Think about that. 8,000 employees all over the world employed by Air America, which was a fake CIA company. These 8,000 employees were being paid out of those funds that I was just talking about that are they have their own insurance program, they have their own pension program. These 8,000 people were there and they had bought $50 million worth of assets, aircraft. Okay, it is in the process of being liquidated, and I'm going to put that in air quotes. Air America complex included a number of other companies with the Pacific Corporation as the holding company. So Pacific Corporation was the big company. Air America reported to it along with several other companies. The general plan for liquidation of Air America is for the Pacific Corporation to sell it. And Air Asia Limited, which has Taipei maintenance operation. The private New York firm R. Dixon Sprees Company was engaged to estimate a fair market value for the complex. Although an extensive search for competitive bidders was made, liars, the agency was unable to find a buyer for any of the affiliated companies except the Taipei maintenance facility. The sale of this company was a going concern to the successful bidder was closed on 31 January 1975. The remaining parts of Air America are being liquidated by sale of individual assets upon completion of existing contracts. Funds realized from the sale could be as high as $25 million and would be returned to the Treasury. Yeah, that's not going to happen because what actually happens is they turn around and use that money to buy the aircraft back on the other side. And because such a large amount of aircraft could not have been masked in order to keep it in operation, they pretended to sell the stuff off one by one only to already pre-set up other proprietaries in order to purchase them. It's just like a self-licking ice cream cone here. Agency financial support for Radio Liberty, and Radio Free Europe, both sizable proprietaries, was terminated in 71, and responsibility for their funding was assumed by Department of State, which means it went nowhere. Just change of ownership, pretend like it's not the CIA, it's still the CIA. Southern Air Transport was sold on 31 December 73 because its contingency capability was no longer needed. Right. The agency realized $6 million from the sale. Cash received was $3 million, which included a $1 million award of arbitration of a dispute over the proceeds of the sale of the aircraft by Southern Air Transport after the sale of the company by the agency. The balance was paid by the purchaser to Air America to retire a debt owed by Southern Air Transport. This is supposedly the only income producing, but you've got to take money to pay off the debt. A group of employees of Southern Air Transport filed a civil action disputing the proprietary of the sale of the company by the agency, but the case was dismissed because you're not allowed to sue the CIA. A more detailed list of various disposals of smaller proprietaries and what, if any, relationships remain thereafter between the agency and subsequent entity appears, let's see, in section 5. So we'll get to that later. All right. So we're going to stop here as far as the tax and regulatory, because basically what this says is what I told you earlier. If they get audited, they will file the US and state tax returns as applicable. But if they get audited, they just pick up the phone call and say, yeah, we're not playing. And they go, okay, it says right down here, the IRS will then cancel the audit in order to conserve auditor manpower. Yeah, because they don't want to die. Um, so anyway, yeah, it's crazy, but we'll pick up there when we continue this, which will probably be tomorrow night, because there are some highlighted places that I want to go with this. So let me jump back over here in the comments and see what everybody's been saying. Okay. Am I the only one that found this cool room? I wonder if they'll mention Operation Tilt in the newly released JFK documents. Um, well, the guy that created this did a data dump, and you can actually search on words in his files. It's Paul over on my X feed if you want to find him. The deep state just took my computer. Some days I wonder. Let's see. Excellent stuff. Good more. Okay. United Fruit. Yep. I always come across United Fruit. Let's not forget Inca in New Orleans. Yeah, that's the one that I was talking about. That's all along. Dude, I know you know. Yep, that's the import-export in New Orleans. Let's see. Chiquita Banana, International, back in the day. Yeah, that was United Fruit that become Chiquita. Who else? Was pulling banana bread out and just caught up after it got started. Bridget's on the go. And banana bread sounds really good. Email me a slice. You guys are awesome. All right. And we already covered Renee, Mager Sarge. Evergreen did wildfire air attack until not too long back out in Oregon. Yeah, they had a bunch of the aircraft that did the water mission out there for fire control. I saw that. Paint the aircraft, no one checks the registration numbers. That's actually funny that you said that, because they got caught doing that down in Miami, where I don't remember exactly who was some pilot that was like a contract pilot had noticed, because if you guys don't know, airplanes have personalities. As a matter of fact, the famous term in maintenance is a hangar queen. There's certain aircraft that no matter what you do, they break every fucking time they fly. And they're called hangar queens as a result of that, because they're always in the hangar getting maintenance done on them. And so certain things happen when you fly aircraft, and people who habitually fly the same 2 or 3 aircraft can definitely tell the difference in how they fly. And so one of the pilots that had been a contract pilot for CIA down in Miami was flying an aircraft for another company after the company, and I can't remember, he may have been an Air America guy, and he's like, dude, I know this airplane. This is an Air America airplane, but it had a different tail number. So Mager Sarge, as usual, is dead on, because there are certain aspects to airplanes, and I can't remember. There was some some attribute of one of the, if I recall this correctly, it was one of the gauges or something that, at certain altitudes would, like, flicker, and as soon as he, saw that happen, he's like, "Son of a bitch, this is the old airplane that was Air America." And so anyway, just thought I'd add that. On X, Mike Hobart, Air America was pivotal to Vietnam and Laos. Absolutely, Mike. Air America basically, um, and a lot of people, um, a lot of the missions that the CIA, I'll just put it this way, a lot of the missions that the CIA flew, they used military people in civilian clothes to fly those missions there. And there are military pilots that have said that. As a matter of fact, the Ravens, I met one of the guys who wrote a book about them. He was one of them at the Smithsonian Air Museum out by Dulles Airport. And I got to talking with him. This was like 2 summers ago when I was there, and I got to talking to him about flying those missions, and when I started asking him questions, his eyes got real big, and he's like, How do you know this?" And I'm like, "'Cause I've been doing research into this for quite a while now, and I've actually went to Vietnam. I did my whole research in Air War College was about this." He goes, "Oh, you're Air Force." And I'm like, "Yes, I'm Air Force." And so I asked him if that was true, if they actually had, because I've read about it several times. Um, the and literally he was like, I was one of them. We had to leave everything, our military ID, our uniforms, everything. And as a matter of fact, once they identified them, they had to wait like 2 to 3 months, and they weren't allowed to cut their hair, so that they had no military haircuts, so that you look like a true civilian if you went up to Laos and flew any of their missions. So, yeah, big deal. Um, okay. I think that is all. Um, I don't think we get any of the chat from X over here. So, um, anyway, thank you guys all for being here. I appreciate it. I see Cousin It. I wish May Brussel was alive to see all of this. I do too. I agree with you 100%. Um, let's see, Mike Hobart. I have some Substacks coming on those operations, Colonel. I'll make sure to send them. USAID was involved as well. You're absolutely right. And Mike, whatever you write as far as your Substack, please do tag me in it, and I would be happy to recommend people go to your. I know you've been part of our efforts here from the very beginning, and I appreciate you being here. So absolutely, tag me in it. Yeah, Renee, Les Wexner is a completely different topic for another night, but you're absolutely right. One of the things that you're going to find out is how these whole air hubs was set up. They learned a lot by what they did over in Vietnam, and what was set up in Cincinnati as part of Les Wexner's limited Victoria's Secret's kind of entire operation at Rickenbacker is all part of this. They went so far as to give them their own customs um, office there. And there's nothing like having your own customs office where you can pay off the custom officials to look the other way when you're bringing in shit. And their regular everyday flight was to Hong Kong using massive 747 cargo aircraft. So there are lots of anecdotal evidence that they were basically flying in weapons and drugs from Hong Kong into Cincinnati as a part of that whole air operation there. So, yeah, good point, Renee. All right, guys, that's it. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you tomorrow at 4.